and welcome to the February 23rd, 2026 City Council Work Session. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling in to one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. In case of a medical emergency, an automated external defibrillator, AED, is located on the counter behind staff located to your left on the west side of the room. In case of an emergency evacuation, emergency exits are through the double doors located at the back of the room. The doors to the patio can also be used as needed. Thank you again for joining us. I now call the February 23rd, 2026 work session of the Eugene City Council to order. I now turn to the city manager to introduce our first topic.
Gavel works.
Thank you, Council President. So our first work session this evening is a presentation on the Human Rights Commission annual report. We have two members of the Human Rights Commission with us tonight, Dr. Silke Booker and Jamie Bowman, and Fabio Andrade from our Office of Equity and Community Engagement. So I'll hand it over to them to get started.
Good evening, councilors. I'm Fabio Andrade with the Office of Equity and Community Engagement. I'll be presenting some highlights from the work done by the Human Rights Commission in the past period. But before we start, we are here with Dr. Silke Booker, the HRC Chair, and Jamie Bowman, Acting Vice Chair. And Dr. Booker has a statement regarding human rights and Black history because we are still celebrating Black History Month. So I'll pass it on to him to read his statement, and then I go back to the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors, for having me here today. What I'm going to read is basically to honor Black history and human rights at the same time. The Black experience with trauma and systematic oppression continues to shape how safety, trust, and belonging are understood in our community. Black residents are often asked to place trust in institutions that reflect the same systems that historically cause harm. When hesitation or caution is expressed, it is frequently misunderstood rather than recognized as a rational response grounded in lived experience. Too often, the cumulative impact of generations of exclusion and inequity is minimized and overlooked. For those living on the margins, this creates a difficult reality. We are asked to move forward without clear evidence that the systems affecting our lives have fundamentally changed. These are not visible wounds, but they are real. They influence how communities engage with government and public process. As Eugene continues to address issues of equity, we must ask whether our efforts are producing measurable change or simply maintaining familiar approaches that create the appearance of progress. Representation alone is not transformation, especially when leadership and decision-making remains closely tied to existing power structures. It is important to distinguish between symbolic recognition and meaningful repair. Restoration requires intentional action that addresses harm and creates opportunity. It does not place the burden of reconciliation on those who have been historically harmed. Change does not begin with statements alone. It begins with decisions. Decisions about standards, accountability, and what this city is willing to confront. The question before us is whether Eugene is prepared to move beyond performative comments and take concrete steps to address anti-Black outcomes. Unity within our communities is essential. The unity must allow room for imperfection, growth, and support. No one has all the answers, and progress requires collaboration rooted in respect and shared responsibility. I am committed to being part of the change, and I encourage others to do the same. Civic engagement is active participation, whether addressing racism, sexism, ageism, classism, or other inequities. Progress happens when people invest their time and leadership into solutions. Human rights must be protected for everyone, everywhere, every day. However, Eugene must also confront a long-standing pattern honoring Black contributions symbolically without sustained economic investment. Black history and legacy are often recognized through names and stories, while Black residents continue to face barriers to land ownership, resources, and wealth building. True recognition must include tangible outcomes. Representation without compensation is insufficient. Recognition without reinvestment is incomplete. As we honor leaders such as Dr. Coleman, Ms. Charmaine Coleman, the first recognized Black families of Eugene, and community members like Wiley Griffin, Henderson Stone, Mabel Bird, Maxine Maxwell, and many others, we must ask how their legacies are reflected in today's policies, budgets, and development priorities. History should not only be remembered, it should inform action. Legacy should not only be acknowledged, it should be invested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Booker. And we will now go through the slides presenting a summary of the work done by the HRC in the so far in their work plan period, which started in July of 2024. This is the current member serving the HRC, Dr. Silky Booker, Kiana Kabuko, Vice Chair. She's on a leave of absence right now. Cynthia Cannon Poindexter, John Bradley, Martha Baldwin, Britton Bena, Jamie Bowman, Acting Vice Chair, Elena Ullman, Vanitha Murthy, who Councilor just appointed a few months ago. And we have one vacancy that is coming up on your agenda for March 9th, plus Councilor Lindsay Leach, who has been the liaison to the Human Rights Commission. We also want to say thank you to former commissioners. They departed the HRC during this period we are reporting on. Blake Burrow, previous chair, Thomas Hura, previous vice chair, and commissioners Jack Lowe, Alaire Fajardo, and Juniper Christopherson. Some of the events that HRC organized in the period include a forum in June of last year, Reimagining Resistance, Human Rights Community Panel, and Award. So there was a conversation about everything that was going on in the country at the time, mostly about the changes happening from the federal administration. And also an opportunity to recognize some people who has been doing work on human rights in Eugene. So the award was given to Anna Lardner, Debbie Williamson-Smith, and to the University of Oregon's Museum of Natural History. It was organized mostly by the outgoing chair, Blake Burrow, and some staff in our team, plus advocates in the community. The Transgender Day of Remembrance was organized by the WCU workgroup members. Our Commissioner Jamie Bowman was participating in that event, and some other commissioners, plus representatives from multiple organizations in the community. It was a beautiful, solemn event, unfortunately remembering all the transgender people who lost their lives in the past year. The Homelessness Person Memorial Vigil was organized by the Homelessness Work Group with support from Lorna Flormo. The previous events were supported by our staff, Melissa Carino, and participation by homeless individuals, mostly around downtown, the Raging Granny, some other community advocates. And again, it was another event that the HRC has been doing since 2019 to remember those who passed while being unhoused in Eugene. The Commission has a budget for sponsorship of community events that support human rights. In the period, the Commission approved sponsorship for the Oregon Desi Fest, for the Catholic Community Services welcoming our neighbor event, our new neighbor event, the Kwanzaa celebration by the Black Cultural Initiative, the Disorient Film Festival, the Eugene Pride event with the Pride Festival Sober Circle, Black Youth Inc. with a Juneteenth gathering that happened at the Market Pavilion, the Gay Men's Chorus performance at the Eugene Pride Festival last year, Comunidad y Herencia Cultural, they organized an event called Noche Cultural, mostly presenting traditions of the Latino and Hispanic culture here, and the NAACP Eugene Springfield Freedom Fund Dinner in 2025. Some recommendations that HRC submitted includes budget recommendations, recommendations on ALPR cameras, and they are right now finishing some recommendations on family compositions in partnership with some community organizations. Some departmental collaborations with city staff included a series of listening sessions we organized starting at the end of 2024, and it went until March of 2025. We organized a series of 6 listening sessions to understand how different communities want to be engaged with the city of Eugene. That resulted in a report and a soon-to-be-released new approach to community engagement that we'll be using with city staff across all departments. They also supported board and commission recruitments. The HRC goes through all the applications that are submitted for the commission, and they provide a recommendation to City Council that may help your decision-making about who to appoint to the Human Rights Commission. The commission has a voting seat at the Police Commission. It was first occupied by Dr. Silke Booker, and the current commissioner is John Bradley. They also had some representation, the Civilian Review Board, Community Development Block Grant, and Housing Policy Board, among other commissions. We have some vacancies right now. We hope to complete those liaison appointments soon. So just a few highlights from the WCU work group. This is a group that has been operating since 2017. They maintain partnerships that aid in fostering belonging for marginalized communities. They do research on local programs to address systemic inequity, and they monitor efforts within the City of Eugene to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. The current co-leads are Commissioner Cynthia Cannon Poindexter and Commissioner Martha Baldwin. The Homelessness and Poverty Work Group, they engage on house community and community groups to encourage the report of hate and bias incidents to our office and also through the state hate and bias system. They continue to advocate to recognize homelessness people as a protected group, and they seek to identify barriers to housing, affordability, and strategies for ending homelessness. The current lead for this group is Commissioner John Bradley. And with that, I will pass it on to our chair and vice chair for some remarks about the work done in the past year, and we will probably open up for a conversation with councilors and answer your questions about the report and the work that HRC is doing.
Well, first, thank you, Fabio, for all your hard work, and Mia as well. We have a good support staff. So I want to first thank you and Mia for your support and making sure that we are prepared for every meeting. Secondly, I want to thank all the commissioners for their hard work and dedication. A lot of the work that a lot of our commissioners do is on their own free time and selflessness. So I want to thank all our volunteers. I'm just a voice for the commission. But at the same time, I was selected or elected by my peers, and I thank them for trusting me in this position. So I'll open up the floor for any questions from councilors.
Thank you for that presentation. I will now open up the floor for council discussion. Councilor Ye?
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to get your guys' opinion. Oftentimes, I mean, I know you guys set a work plan like other commissions, and they're often thinking well ahead of when you get to a subject, but sometimes things come up at our table that feel a little last minute. I'm wondering if you think there is a way we could better be able to have input from the Human Rights Commission on those things that come up and they're not something where you have 2 or 3 months to, respond, right? But it's a little more like maybe in the next month or two. Because it feels like there are opportunities where we could have used good advice from the HRC, but it just there wasn't a system in place to be able to make that reasonable.
I agree with you on that, and I'm open to suggestions of a better way to communicate with City Council. We do have a liaison, but not always is our liaison able to be there just for scheduling conflicts. But that is one thing that's in place. Another thing was just having more of an open dialogue with HRC. One of the things I remember from interviewing the new city manager is she stated she wanted to be more interactive with the commissions, and I think that's needed. Having a relationship with city councilors, city managers, and not just being looked upon as an advisory council. I think HRC's voice and presence is needed in a lot of issues that is presented to city council. It's just we're always looked upon as an advisory committee or commission. That hinders, I think, our input and our participation in a lot of things that should require us to show up. For instance, when the mayor had the press conference a couple weeks ago, and and was declaring a national human rights as a national emergency for the city. Human Rights wasn't invited to that or notified of that press conference. I saw NAACP there, saw Senator Manning there, saw I think a few commissioners, other people I wasn't even aware who they were, but that alone would have shown human rights presence to stand with the mayor and, you know, have that presence shown. So a lot of times I think we're just not included or looked upon to have a voice in things that should require our voice and our presence. So I'm open to creating a more direct pathway for HRC to be involved in things that we should be involved in, and especially like given the fact of what happened with the federal building downtown. Unless we speak on it in our meetings, we're not involved, you know, and I see videos all the time online, people, you know, where's the human rights? Where's this? Where's that? Well, we're here. It's just, I think the community at large doesn't understand how to interact with us or what we're utilized for or anything that we are involved in. It's very detached from the community. So we would love support from City Council in promoting us more, making sure that the websites and different things that require promotion mention human rights along any issues that pertain to human rights, which is pretty much everything, right?
Right.
So yeah, just I'm open to suggestions on how to build that relationship, not only with the community, but with the city councilors as well. I think it's needed. I would show up, you know, as chair. I think that's part of my duty is to show up and have these conversations and dialogue. I would like to be invited. I think that's the biggest part, is being invited to the table. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. But yeah, I'm open to any suggestions that would allow human rights to have more of a voice, a presence, and relationship with City Council and the community at large.
In our last meeting, we established a subcommittee to respond to the needs of immigrant families and how we could go about that more expeditiously instead of waiting for our monthly meetings. There's only so much we can cover in the hour and a half that we meet. And I'm wondering if something like that is an option, if there is a subcommittee of us that says this thing is coming up and here's some representation, and we can assemble at a moment's notice and give advice or hear, and yeah, really move the commission past kind of the box checking point that it feels like it is in now, where we're more reactive than proactive, and start building more community, like Dr. Booker said, and being a presence that's out there that people know that we are a resource and we can be utilized.
Great, thank you. That's actually a really great idea. I don't know if that would be the idea, but I think that's the kind of thing that would be very helpful. I'm often, you know, wish that the HRC was at more, you know, public forums and had that opportunity. I mean, we do get emails from you guys, and that's great, and memos, but I feel like if the public was able to hear from you more often, more publicly, right? It might help with that understanding what your role is, because I can understand why people are confused. You know, there's a lot of boards and commissions, and sometimes it can be confusing about what is the role and how do I connect and when is it appropriate. So yeah, thank you guys for that answer.
Thank you, Councilor Yee. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there others? Counselor Groves?
Thank you, Council President. So what are your goals for this next year? Do you have at least some, so we can get an idea of what you're going to be working on? That's kind of helps us know how to support you.
Glad that you asked. Well, we have our good old work plan, and it's full of items from the previous leadership and work group that we had, I think, in 2024 or 25. And a lot of these work group items are staggered due to us losing commissioners, voting new ones in, trying to figure out where they would like to volunteer. A lot of our work plan is solely based upon the time, effort of our volunteers. And a lot of time, that effort is yo-yoed, if you will, based off of the volunteers we have and their efforts to be able to participate, right? So with our work plan, we have a lot ongoing, and we have a lot that is in progress. So in this new year coming up, what we would like to do is take the ones that are ongoing, complete those alongside the ones that are in progress, and not add anything until we can collectively as a group decide which work group items, or work plan items from the previous leadership do we want to keep, that we have the personnel to volunteer and to push forward, and which work group items do we maybe need to table, not erase, but maybe table, until we can get the efficient volunteers or interest in those particular work plan items that we can then complete them. So we have a plethora of, I think, 3 sheets of work plan items that we are currently attacking. but we also have to look at different things that come across us that require our acute attention. For instance, we just got the grant that we're responsible for. We just created a subcommittee to kind of discuss how we're going to give those funds out, those emergency funds to families. So again, that will take away from the work plan items because that's more important. So things like that will come across our purview that we have to stop working on one thing in order to work on something else that's a priority. But we plan on going by our work plan and knocking a lot of those things out that are either in progress or are ongoing. Yes, sir. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, and I'm aware of your work plan. I was just,
sir.
I guess I was looking for what are your top 3 issues. But before I get to that,
Yes.
I want to say I think it's also important that you leave some space. I've seen work plans so tight
Yes, sir.
that there's no room to add anything else in. And
Yes,
when
that's
you
true.
see the changing dynamic that we're dealing with all the time, I think you got to have some flexibility and be able to respond
Yes, sir.
to changing conditions. You know, I think the immigration thing is one of those.
Yes,
And
sir.
so, I would encourage you to also leave some flexibility in your plan.
Yes, sir. And thank you for suggesting that. I definitely make sure we will. Thank you.
Right?
Thank
And
you, sir.
then like, just what you think the top 3 are.
Well, hold on, let me center myself, because,
Well, and I think more than a specific top 3, it's like, what are our overarching goals, right?
Right.
So it's building capacity, making sure that we're connecting with folks that may have been involved before, that would like to be involved again, that maybe for some reason or another have fallen off. Building those relationships in community. On March 4th, we're having a community potluck for the We See You group, for folks that have been involved in the past, for groups that have shown up or been part of our organization, so that we can reach back out to those folks. And I've only been here for about 6 months, and so I don't have a lot of those relationships that are so invaluable in the work that we do. And so we're realizing that as the commissioners turn over, those relationships need to stay. So building capacity, how are we doing that? How are we maintaining relationships and bringing people back to the table who can maintain their relationship with the HRC throughout the different phases that revolve through the door, so that those relationships maintain. Being responsive to our community, knowing that we have a work plan, and fortunately, when you look through this thing, it is both broad and very specific. Everything that we come up with is somehow covered in one of these boxes, and I don't know how they did that. It seems magical. You're like, can I do X, Y, Z? And they're like, yes, look at all of the boxes that specific thing could fit under. So that feels good in the way that there are so many boxes, but that also gives us so much room to really do what we want to do. So being responsive to what our community needs from us, more than sticking to this like white supremacist ideal of, well, I have an agenda and I'm gonna stick with that regardless of what comes up, and these are where my deliverables are. Like, that's not as important to us as making sure that, again, our community sees us, hears us, knows that we're here to support them, and that we are showing up in ways that are tangible, enforceable, and feel like they're more than just a box check.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. So that's very helpful. You know, because we're talking about how can council support you, and part of that is understanding what you're doing and what your needs are. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Council President.
Thank you, Counselor Groves. Counselor Zelenka?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Yeah, the Human Rights Commission has a broad mandate, and human rights is everything to everybody all over the place. Good title for a movie, maybe. And I understand volunteer groups, especially our boards and commissions, and that the work that they do is dependent upon what people are interested in. But when I read your work plan, there's 43 items on this. It's way too broad, and it's too scattered. there's just too much on here. And when I look at it, I think there was only one complete. When you have too many work items, too scattered like this, you don't get accomplishments. And when you don't get accomplishments, you don't get recognition. So my suggestion is narrow this down. Narrow this down to take several areas that you're interested in. The advisory groups is probably a good place to start. Homelessness obviously be one of them. Immigrant rights would be another one, for instance. Come up with the top 3 for each one of those. Have that be your work plan. Make that be the area that you work on. It's gonna have to reflect what volunteers want to do, but it should be a good conversation. So, I was gonna ask the same question that Councilor Groves asked, which is, what's your top 3 on homelessness? There's 26 of them in here. That's too many. And so you don't have to put everything on your work plan that comes across the transom. And that's what it kind of appears like you've done over the last several years. And I've noticed that over time that this work plan doesn't seem to get narrowed, it gets bigger. So every time someone suggests something, you guys add it to the work plan. I'm suggesting just the opposite. Focus what you're doing, and it's going to focus on what people want to do. So, and how you do it it will make a big difference, I think, in how the commission's received and what you guys end up doing and having the impact that you have. Too scattered is not good.
Sorry, I will just provide some information, Councilor, about the process we're using right now, because this work plan was prepared in 2024 and approved a little bit outside of the traditional schedule we had for the Human Rights Commission. That was because of many factors. So it was approved in February of 2025, but it was supposed to be valid since August of 2024. So we are a little bit off schedule right now in the cycle. And most of the commissions who are serving right now did not participate in the preparation of this work plan. So the conversation we had at that time, and I remember some councilors offering this advice to the commission back then, but their thinking was that they want to make everything visible, to say that if it wasn't visible, for some people, the issues that they care about would not be seen. So that was the approach that commission took. The current commission is thinking about reducing the size of the work plan. So at their meeting last week, they separate. So when you see in your report, it has 2 sets of work plan items. Starting on page, sorry, I don't have the numbering for the page. But it has a table that says the following work plan items were deprioritized and will be reconsidered for the upcoming 2026-2028 work plan development process. So they have already reduced in about half the items, and they have 5 more months to complete some of those items. So this is a partial report, and we'll be coming back when we are on the agenda for the 2026-2028 work plan with that conversation. And that should be up for the current commissioners to decide how they want to consider what to include back at that time.
Yeah, so I do plan on taking your advice into consideration. I've only been elected since June, I believe, so the next work plan meeting that we do have, I plan on tailoring it down or scaling it down so that we're working on things that we know we can complete.
Right, yeah, and also keeping in mind that this isn't work that is check-offable in the same way that other commissions have work that is check-offable. All of these things that we're doing are revolving doors that are going to continue to need to be done over and over and over again through every iteration of what this group looks like, through every iteration of what this council looks like, what this community looks like. These are not necessarily deliverables and checkables in that way. And yeah, I think going more broad and not so hyper-specific is something that I would have done if I had been the one to put this together. But it's wonderful that the folks who did had such lofty goals. And we're always doing things. So it's like, again, it's not a huge priority to me to stick with this white supremacist value of a deliverable and a check-off box that I've done this thing that I said I would do. Our responsibility is community responsiveness is paying attention to what is going on right now. And unfortunately, more than any other commission, we are pulled by what is happening currently constantly. There's another crisis, another thing that comes up. And so while these things are important, and of course they're beautiful, lofty goals, I love that they're written down, I love that we can reference them, the way that we measure our success is not necessarily against what's written on this piece of paper. It's, does our community know who we are? Are they showing up to the events that we're planning? Are we reminding them that we're here? Are we remaining consistent in the way that we show up? Can they count on us every year to do an event? Are we not only coming up with what we as a city like to do and taking the reins and pushing that forward, are we listening and are we responsive to people who are already doing this work, who just need our support? And so I just think it's just important to keep in mind that this is not necessarily a check kind of list the way that it can be with other organizations.
Yeah, I totally get that. And the goals list is fine, and that should be broad.
Lofty.
But the work plan needs to be, here's the things we're going to work on this year. And it should be much, much more narrow.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree.
And I'm glad to hear that you're taking that up, because that'll make you much more successful and more impactful, which you need to be.
Thank you, Councilor Zelenka. Councilor Kuczynski.
Yes, thank you. And first off, I just want to thank you and the rest of the commission and all of the staff working with you for all the work you put into this on a volunteer basis. It is deeply appreciated. I also want to thank you. I feel like the first question I had, you've already answered, which is council added a thing to your work plan. And I appreciate hearing like sort of the first steps that you're taking with the funding to help support immigrant families that we discussed a few weeks ago. So thank you again for taking that on. I wanted to see if I could get a little bit more. One of the recommendations that you're working on is on family composition policies. Can you let me know a little bit more what that is and what that's about?
Yeah, so we were approached by a group called OPEN, and I forget what the acronym is standing for right now, but it's a group of polyamorous folks, acknowledging that family structures and relationships can look a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. And as it stands right now, there are very few places where those families are protected from workplace discrimination, from rental discrimination, from discrimination of any kind. And so what they're trying to do is approach cities to, as much as we can within our own city structure, protect families from discrimination who maybe are made up of 3 people, who maybe there's 4 parents involved, whose families look a lot of different ways and are not granted the same protection that your typical 2-parent household is. And as a person who's married to a woman, I understand that it's like my rights have just very recently been codified in any kind of law. And so it really speaks to me as a person who didn't always have that, to know that if it's important that we don't get to dictate what somebody's family looks like. We don't get to dictate what relationships mean to people, but we can say, I don't have to understand it. It doesn't have to make a lot of sense to me, but I can do what I can do to protect you and your family structure and make sure that you have housing and employment and you're able to pick your kid up from school. And so we're just really excited and proud to do what we can to hear these folks out and make our recommendation that, of course, no matter what your family looks like, you should be able to have housing. Of course, you shouldn't be able to get fired for that. And those protections don't currently exist. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you for talking a little bit more about that. And then what sort of methods do you all have to sort of know what's coming up before council? Like what's on the agenda for March or?
I can report on that, Councilor. So for every meeting, we have the tentative agenda for council. Every meeting of the HRC, we have the tentative agenda for council, and we highlight some of the items that we believe are more directly related to the HRC work plan. So we present that to commissioners, and they can decide if they want to. Sometimes they create ad hoc committees to work on a recommendation. So, for example, that was the case with the ALPR cameras. Because the HRC meets once a month and only nine times during the year. So sometimes the calendars do not align. And to have a recommendation ready, it requires that we add it to the commission agenda, that they take an action, either to approve a recommendation or to create an ad hoc committee and delegate something to them, so we can submit that to council. So we have some limitations on the process that not always allow us to have a recommendation ready by the time city council is discussing something. When we know of things that are coming like 2 or 3 months ahead, we can give them a heads up and help them prepare for that. But eventually, it's up for the commission to decide what is more pressing for them to work on. But as a staff, we do give them a list of topics, and Councilor Leach has also been providing, when she was attending in person, she was providing comments on those, and lately providing us a summary in writing about topics that she believes is important for the GSC to weigh in on.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Counselor Krasinski. I will insert myself here and then give opportunity for a second round. If there are no others online that would like to participate. First of all, thank you so much for this report. Thank you for all of your work. It's amazing to see the passion and the experience and everything that you all bring to that commission. It's been such an honor to me to be the liaison. I have had a lot of scheduling conflicts over the last 6 months. Unfortunately, it broke my heart to ask to be reassigned. And because it's the commission that is closest to my skills, experience, and heart work. But I just want to say that I am, always there with you in spirit when I can be. I am really grateful for the conversation around how can we be more engaging together? How can we be, involving you? I think it really does speak to, what is the role and how do we make those adjustments based on all of the new leadership, right? I think what you're addressing right now is, hey, we had a former leadership that liked to do it this way and had a work plan that looks like this, and now we're transitioning because we see a different kind of way that we would like to do it, and I think that's beautiful work. I hear this kind of, we have the strategic vision, but we have a little bit narrower set of actual workable goals that we are dealing with, and that might be address urgent community needs as they arise, because like you said, it's not something that's easily measurable. I work in human services as well. Sometimes you can't measure it, but we can say this is the way we want. These are our values, and this is how we are going to address it. Again, yes, thank you for taking on a new task. I'm really proud that you'll be able to take on that grant work and make really great decisions for us in our city. So just keep up the good work, and looking forward to continuing to work with you, and always, happy to hear more feedback on the ways that we can engage together. And with that, I will turn it to Councilor Groves for a second round.
Thank you, Council President. I think the additional point I was going to make was made already, so I'll pass at this point. Thank you.
Wonderful. If there's no other comments from City Council, we will move on to our next topic.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, councilors, and thank you for having me. I look forward to building our relationship and hopefully being able to show up more.
Thank you, Dr. Booker. I will now turn to the city manager for our next agenda item.
Thank you, Council President. Our next item is part 1 of 2 on a conversation around home energy score engagement and research findings. The second meeting will be on policy and the potential for action. That'll be coming up in early March, and we have Danielle Klinkabel here to present.
Okay, there we go. Are we good? Okay. Good evening, City Council. My name is Danielle Klinkabel, and I am a climate policy analyst in the sustainability program, and joining me tonight is Ian Penn, the sustainability manager. So this is the first of 2 work sessions focusing on a proposed home energy score disclosure policy, with the second one scheduled for March 9th. A quick overview of tonight's presentation. I'll provide a quick background, explain the home energy score tool and policy, and then talk about our engagement and research that we've done. At the second work session, staff will discuss other key considerations, at which time council may decide to take action. So first, I'd like to provide a bit of context on our housing stock in Eugene. Roughly 65% of homes were built before 1990, when modern energy efficiency standards were established. This means that many homes in the area lack insulation and efficient heating. These conditions drive up energy costs, reduce indoor air quality and comfort, and lead to more greenhouse gas emissions. Many of these impacts disproportionately affect low-income households. Council has established a goal to decarbonize existing homes and buildings by 2045 to not only reduce the carbon impact of homes, but also to improve their energy efficiency. In 2024, staff conducted a big engagement effort to understand opportunities and challenges for achieving this goal. And what we learned is that many people are unaware of how to improve their home's energy efficiency. The community helped identify priorities, and these were presented to City Council in July of 2024. 2 of the top priorities include to provide more education and guidance and to expand awareness of incentives. So expanding the use of home energy scores is one pathway to help achieve these priorities. Previous City Council direction has directed staff to explore a policy that would require you to disclose a home energy score when selling a home. The first 2 motions up here direct staff to do community engagement, develop a draft ordinance framework, identify potential funding sources, and create an implementation roadmap. The last motion directs staff to develop options for renters. The focus is currently on developing the policy for home sales first, because that is a much more straightforward pathway. So what is a home energy score? It is a standardized tool developed by the U.S. Department of Energy to do a home energy assessment. It costs about $150 to $250, depending on the size of the home, and takes about an hour to complete. A licensed energy assessor will evaluate a variety of features throughout the house, such as the insulation, the heating system, the volume of heated space, the windows, and more. And based on this information, they'll provide a score on a scale of 1 to 10 based on the energy usage of that home. You can think of this kind of like a miles per gallon rating for a car. The report also includes energy cost estimates, recommendations for how you can improve the score, and links to utility incentives like rebates, tax credits, and loans. Here's some information I pulled from a sample score report. You can see that this home scored a 3 with estimated energy costs at about $1,800. This doesn't mean the home is poorly built or that it's a bad home. It just means the home uses more energy than the average home in the US, and that there is significant room for improvement to reduce the home's energy use. You can see that this home could score an 8 if it made the recommended improvements, and with that they would reap significant savings in energy costs. Here are some examples of what the recommendations typically are. Things like adding insulation, installing a heat pump or a heat pump water heater, upgrading windows, and there are incentives that can help finance many of these upgrades. So Home Energy Score is an effective tool for public policy because it is pretty affordable and the information is made really accessible. Many other cities, including 4 cities in Oregon, have implemented a Home Energy Score disclosure requirement. Basically, the way it works is the seller of a home would get a Home Energy Score before they advertise the home for sale. They would include the score report in the MLS database, and then any prospective buyer can view the report as they look at homes on Zillow or Redfin or places like that. And a quick note is that this policy does not require the seller or the buyer to make energy improvements. It just provides information. So there are 3 primary goals of the policy. The first is to increase transparency about energy features and costs in order to provide clear and consistent information about those things to the buyers in order to support them making an informed decision. The second goal is to educate homeowners and buyers about opportunities for improving energy efficiency. And finally, to connect homeowners to resources and incentives to help finance upgrades. Many of these goals align not only with previous engagement efforts that I mentioned earlier, but also other council priorities, including the Climate Action Plan, the Housing Implementation Pipeline, and Council Strategic Plan. This policy is a tool that continues to move the ball down the field with these priorities. So moving on to engagement, staff engaged roughly 630 people. This was the second big engagement effort that our team has led in the last 2 years related to buildings and energy. And we really tried to be creative so we could engage a wide range of people. We kicked off engagement by holding 2 mock debates with the Youth Advisory Council and a group of MBA students from the U of O. We set up a game where participants were assigned a character and they were asked to share from that character's perspective. This helped staff understand different viewpoints on the policy. We also attended many community events with an Intercept survey, and with these events, we were really successful at talking to people who aren't typically involved or participating in public policy. It's worth noting that from this segment of engagement, close to 90% support or strongly support the disclosure policy. We also had group meetings and interviews with specific interest groups and many experts in the field, allowing for very in-depth conversations. At these meetings, there was a pretty wide range of perspectives on the policy, both strongly in support as well as those who had concerns. And our online survey probably reached the greatest number of people, with 65% of participants supporting the policy. In addition to engagement, we hired Earth Advantage to do policy research for us. They are a national expert in helping cities translate complex building science into practical housing and energy policies. These were some of the things that they focused on with their research, and really our goal was to understand what has been observed in other jurisdictions and through research and the local housing trends in Eugene. So I'd like to distill what we learned through engagement and research into the following 6 themes that crossed pretty much all of the conversations we had. I'll give an overview of the range of comments that we heard that relate to each theme, followed by the relevant research. And my goal is to highlight for you how community perceptions might align or diverge from the outcomes that have been observed in other cities. So the first theme, transparency of home energy information. A lot of realtors we talked to shared that buyers rarely ask about energy efficiency, indicating that they aren't interested in it, and therefore a home energy score isn't something that would be valuable. A lot of people shared they had a limited understanding of energy features and costs when they bought their home, and more transparency up front would have been helpful so they could better anticipate those things. What the research indicates is that buyers consistently lack information about home energy performance when buying a home. and that mandatory score programs help increase that awareness. And so the key takeaway here is that the biggest benefit of a home energy score disclosure policy is to close that information gap. Number two, so will the policy lead people to complete home improvement projects? Many participants shared that requiring home energy scores will encourage homeowners to make improvements. Some viewed this as putting negative pressure on sellers to make costly upgrades, while others viewed it as a positive, market-based way to get people to voluntarily make upgrades. And what the research indicates from looking at utility data is that homes with a score are anywhere from 8 to 23% more likely to pursue energy efficiency incentives. And often these are for significant projects such as insulation or heat pump systems. So here, the key takeaway is that homes with a score are more likely to pursue energy efficiency incentives and complete home improvement projects. Number three, the impact of this policy on housing prices. This came up a lot. Some worried this would increase home sale prices because sellers would be making costly improvements and passing those costs down. There was concern that low-scoring homes or perhaps even entire neighborhoods could be impacted. There is extensive research on the impact of score disclosure on housing affordability, and what it indicates is that disclosure does not cause irrational home price inflation. Slight sale price increases have been noted for high-scoring homes, and these increases are proportional to the energy cost, the projected energy cost savings for that home. There's no evidence that buyers avoid low-scoring homes or see reduced sale prices. And there's no correlation between low-scoring homes and socioeconomic neighborhoods. The key takeaway here is that score disclosure has minimal impact on home sale prices, and it does not disadvantage low-income groups. Staff heard concerns that the policy would negatively impact the real estate market transaction. There were concerns that adding another step would delay and complicate the home sale process. Several shared that this feels redundant to a home inspection, and there are concerns this could impact mortgage lending. Research indicates there has not been market disruption noticed in cities with score disclosure. It has not slowed home sales. The score report is different than a home inspection. And in terms of lending, energy scores and energy data in general is not something that is considered in underwriting. And it's actually the opposite. Having a score can help you unlock additional financing tools to pay for improvements. In terms of the policy's impact on climate, so many participants pointed out that they didn't see how this would reduce emissions, and that the policy should really focus on older homes or rented homes to achieve a bigger climate impact. The research reinforces this. It indicates that disclosure alone does not produce very much greenhouse gas reductions. The emissions reductions occur as homeowners are able to make improvements. One possible climate benefit of this policy is that it will provide a wealth of data that can help staff better understand overall housing and energy trends that impact affordability in the environment. This data can help inform strategies such as how to target incentives or address energy burden or scale clean energy supply. So the key takeaway here is that there's very little GHG reductions from a policy that only requires disclosure, but this policy could help to lay the groundwork for future climate initiatives. Finally, we heard a range of comments related to how the program would be implemented, such as how will it be enforced? Who will be exempt? What about people who can't afford to get a score? Should it be triggered at time of listing or time of sale? Will there be enough licensed assessors to serve the policy? So with many of these elements, We have the advantage of learning best practices from other cities where this policy has been implemented. And if council decides to proceed, those best practices can help inform how we implement the policy here. So those were the main 6 themes of what we heard and researched, but there's a lot more, and I would refer counselors to look at attachment B in the AIS. There are just a few more I'd like to touch on. First, a lot of people emphasized the economic development potential of this policy. Many noted it could create new jobs in terms of assessors delivering the scores. And our research shows that could be as high as 16 to 20 jobs for Eugene. Participants who we talked to also noted that this could increase demand for residential contractors with more people completing home improvements. And also, when homeowners leverage utility incentives, this helps to capture additional investment into the housing stock and the broader community. The second thing that came up quite a bit were debates around whether the home energy score tool is adequate. Some were confused about how the score is calculated, what the score means, with some people believing it wasn't robust enough to be useful. And really, that tool, the home energy score tool, has become the preferred assessment method for this type of policy because it is a standardized method and relatively accessible to digest compared to some of the other tools that are out there. And finally, we heard again and again, there is a need for more incentives to help finance improvements and upgrades. This is something we heard a lot in our previous engagement effort, so I just want to keep that top of mind for City Council. So basically, in summary, a home energy score disclosure requirement is something that could expand awareness and understanding of home energy performance, opportunities for improvement, and existing incentives. The policy is informed by research and best practices. It aligns with extensive engagement and previous goals and priorities that council has established. And overall, there is strong community support with some concern and opposition from specific groups. And just as a quick preview of the next work session, staff will provide more detail on the steps required to implement this into an ordinance in city code. We'll share a rough framework of the elements that would be addressed in an ordinance, as well as an estimated budget to implement the policy and potential funding sources. At the next work session, council will have the opportunity to decide to direct staff to draft an ordinance. And at this time, we welcome your thoughts. What we'd really like to hear is if you have further questions around what a home energy score is or how the policy would work, more details about what we heard in engagement, and any other clarifications around what the research shows.
Thank you for that presentation. I will turn it to council discussion. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Council President. I appreciate it, and thank you very much for all the work in the report. I appreciate that. My first question is: you said 635 people involved in engagement. Was that the number?
Yes, 632. I think.
Okay, well, I was
Give or
close.
take a couple.
I was close there.
Yeah.
I was trying to listen as well as I could, but I got
Appreciate
really
that.
close there. Excellent. So can you tell me after that, and that seems like a lot of engagement and a lot of folks weighing in, how did that engagement alter the work that you had proposed initially and what you showed to them? And, or maybe you'd care to characterize how that engagement affected what's in here or what got reported to us?
Yeah. I can share a little bit more about our process. So we kind of did engagement and research concurrently and used both of those to inform each other. So initially we started with engagement, heard concerns. We started to notice, heard concerns and comments in support and comments in general. Started to notice a lot of trends with what we were hearing around some of the themes that I mentioned, things like impact on home sale prices, buyers want this information, buyers don't want this information, likelihood that this would affect and encourage homeowners to make upgrades. And so then we kind of used those comments to frame, to reinforce what our research was doing and to sort of ground truth, like, are these concerns and comments and perspectives that we're hearing in the community showing up in the other communities that have this policy implemented?
So the feedback you got from our community was used just to compare to what you heard and read in other communities?
Well, the intent was to put them side by side. And so that's what the goal has been with putting together this report, was to show, here's what we heard from our community in Eugene, here's what has been observed in other cities that have this policy, and to show those things side by side to make it as clear as possible for city council. We also had our researcher look at some local data around housing trends to inform, how this could work here in Eugene.
Well, you also, one of your conclusions towards the end was really interesting to me. The fact that you said you don't, and please correct me if I'm wrong in how I heard this, you don't think that it will have a large impact on actual work to affect the climate so much as it affects our information base as an organization.
I would say that's accurate.
I'm somebody who professionally funds home loans every day. I talk to multiple realtors every day. I'm a loan officer. That's what I do. And I agree with you that the likelihood that us mandating an energy score would have an effect on lending is minimal for now. I wouldn't predict what tomorrow looks like, frankly, on that, but I would say that's probably true for now. I would say, however, that for us to have information as a city and as a council, and at the same time to make everybody who buys a house spend another $200 on a process that's already really, really expensive, especially in our community, I question the wisdom of us doing that, the value of the information for the sake of the harm it's going to cause a lot of people. Because when housing is already incredibly high priced in our community, it's already very hard to do, and we haven't talked about the difference in what it'll cost to renters, because that $200 being spent on a rental will be translated down to how much people have to pay who are renting a place, and that impact is gonna be substantial too. I'm running out of time, but I could go on for a while here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Clark. Councilor Groves?
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for the presentation. First of all, for the people listening at home, you can find out how much a house that you want to buy is spending on electricity and or natural gas right now without this. That's available. And so is, if there's vacant land in a neighborhood you're looking to buy in, check and see what could go in there in the future. I keep running into people that are surprised of developments going in their neighborhoods, and that information is available of what could go in there before you buy your house. I want to get into the data a little bit. You were saying that cities that have implemented this are not seeing any problems with pricing or significant changes in that. Is that what data that is collected is saying, or is there just an absence of data that you are concluding that there's no problems? Because they're two very different things.
There's extensive data on that exact issue, and a lot of the citations are included in the policy memo.
And do we have any information on, let's say, people over 65 years of age, which most are on fixed incomes, what the average age of the homes they are living in? Is that available?
That is not, Councilor Groves, thank you for that question. That is not something we've looked at. It probably is available. That is not something we necessarily did in terms of a demographic breakdown of housing things, but I'm sure based on growth strategies or other things that exist somewhere in the city.
I think it would be interesting to see that. I think it'd be interesting to look at income based homes, and knowing that people are on fixed incomes, how are they going to pay for some of this work? And I think it would be interesting to see the differences in different parts of our community. We have parts of our community have generally older homes, and unless you've taken that down to the stud walls, you're never going to get those to a reasonable energy level. But just to know how this is going to affect our community, I think we need more, at least I'd like to see more information on that. It is curious in looking at this, and but again, some of this information is available today to people. So I know I checked on it every time I've bought or sold a house, and so I know it's available. I think that's all I have at this point, but I appreciate the work. I still have some concerns on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. Councilor Kaczynski.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation and all the work and the extensive packet of research, which I very much enjoyed reading. I very much like it when we were able to bring data into these conversations. So for me, I feel like this is a tool that would have been handy for me to have when I've been purchasing houses in the past, particularly as a newer or first-time home buyer, which I'm not anymore, but I was, not that long ago. There were a lot of questions that I didn't know to ask. There were a lot of information being given to me that I didn't necessarily know how to interpret. And one of the things that I see this as doing is, for a comparatively low cost, when you think about all of the things that are involved in purchasing a home, provides information that would have helped me have a better understanding of like the total cost of owning that home. Because while the utility bills are available, you can look them up, one of the things that struck me looking at this research was how this data and the Energy Store almost disaggregates sort of the individual usage behavior of the people in the home with the sort of features of the home. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly? So it kind of looks at just what the home itself costs and kind of pulls out some skewing that could happen in utility bill data because I happen to be particularly never turn on the lights or always have the lights on, right? And so that kind of helps sort some of that out in this score. Is that right? Okay. And I think it also helps, sort of isolate some of those things that maybe I could get from an inspection report, and kind of be able to say like, okay, the first thing I did when I bought like both of my houses was make like a punch list of like, here's the things I need to deal with right away. And kind of, I feel like looking at this would help me kind of prioritize some of those things. Like I'm still gonna fix the locks, but then if I'm choosing between like painting something and putting in some insulation, maybe I do the insulation. So I'm feeling like this is one of these things that's kind of, in the scale of things, it's gonna have a huge impact. It's not gonna have as big an immediate impact, but also I see it as being something that's very helpful for empowering people to take steps to help with the climate. Thank you, and thank you for all your work.
Counselor, I have Counselor Zelenka, and then Evans, Yeh, and then myself.
Thanks. So we're not alone in taking this topic on. What other cities in Oregon have done this?
There's 4 cities that have done it: Bend, Portland, Hillsborough, and Milwaukee.
Right, and Salem and Ashland are looking at it right now at the same time we are. And how many scores have there been done in the state?
There's been 60,000 score reports done statewide.
60,000, okay, that's a lot. Yeah, this is very low cost. $150 is minimal, and you're spending $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 on a home. So, and it, as the research said, it's minimal to no impact on sales or prices of homes. The thing that it does do, though, is that increase in awareness and information about the house. It's that information gap that's currently missing. It's not so much, Randy, how much you're paying in utility bills right now. It's the comparison to other homes and the ability to lower that price, which the home energy score does. It's nice to know how much you're paying for utility bills, but it's better to know how much you can in the future pay because you did improvements. So it's that the recommended improvements and what it could cost, that's really the important thing. And that's why it actually works, because it actually leads to those improvements. And it leads to the reduction in energy use and therefore the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The policy itself doesn't do that, but it's the actions that are the result of the information that actually do that. And it's since it has such a minimal impact on the upfront purchase price, the focus is on the operating cost of a house. The operating cost of the house is what people really need to focus on. Once you've bought the house, then you have to pay for it to live in it. And if you're paying $1,800 a month versus $600 a month on energy bills, it's a huge difference to your monthly cash flow. And that's where most people don't think about, but this allows them to then understand at a better level and a more refined level that allows them to make those decisions. And there are lots of programs to provide for incentives to do those improvements in your house through EWEB and Northwest Natural. And as well, other communities have done, maybe you have some examples, stipends for low-income people to do the home energy score. You have any examples of that? Because, I mean, that's obviously an equity issue, but sometimes you can get that paid for by somebody else.
Yeah, it's typical for, at least for the 4 cities in Oregon, for there to be a small fund set aside for, to provide subsidized scores for sellers who might not be able to afford the $150, $200. So depending on, that's been predicted to, Eugene should set about $10,000 a year aside to cover that, for that fund, subsidized scores.
Yeah, I thought it would be more than that. Okay, thank you.
Actually, for Eugene, it was $5,000. Portland has set aside 10, and they usually don't get through that money, but they have set aside $10,000 for covering people who are 80% of AMI in terms of their income to cover the cost of the score for them.
Is that an automatic thing, or do they have to request it?
It's something that you request up in Portland through community energy
request
projects. In Bend, it's similar, that they have, it's requested through a service.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you have to know about it, though. Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Zelenka. Councilor Evans?
Thank you, Council President. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So my question is more about if we were to move forward with this policy, you talked about maybe 15 to 20 assessors that could go in and do the housing scores and all of that kind of thing. Can you kind of, and I was going through the AIS again, and I didn't see where it actually talks about how the policy would be implemented. Where would it live administratively? Is it living in sustainability? Is it living in another part of the city or the budget? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the workforce piece. In a lot of the other cities that were looked at, this tends to be an add-on service for inspectors, appraisers, those types of jobs where this is something that could easily fit into their wheelhouse. And it is predicted that it would take about 16 to 20 people who are certified assessors in order to serve this policy and with minimal disruption to the real estate market, so that, you know, when someone wants to list a home, they can quickly call someone who can come do the assessment. So that's sort of the workforce need that would be anticipated. And typically, cities have set aside a little bit of money at the beginning to help train assessors and get that workforce pool up to capacity before the policy launches. That's just a strategy that other cities have used to create a smooth implementation.
Well, I'm more specifically interested in where in the city would this live?
And I appreciate that question, Councilor Evans, and we're going to go into that in much more detail at the next work session. But broadly, this would live right now within the sustainability program. It would be something that the program would administer.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to figure out administratively. Where would this live? Who would be in charge of it? And what's the feedback loop in terms of assessing the effectiveness of the program?
Yeah, and the research document from Earth Advantage goes into a little bit of that, and again, we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a couple of weeks. But the idea is it would be about a half of an FTE, and that would include outreach, it would include education, it would include things such as doing auditing, looking for compliance, things like that. If this was something that council wanted to move forward with.
So, so from the perspective of employment, we're talking about a 0.5 FTE and then other associated cost around that would be part of the platform to set this up, correct?
There would be some initial startup costs, and then mostly it would be either absorbed by the program or find some other way to cover that additional half an FTE.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of figure out is how much would the program basically be paying for itself versus us having additional investment, administratively from the city on this.
I think most of the administrative burden would be borne by existing staff. That was our current envision for this right now. And that would, I'm hoping we can get into this a little bit more in a couple of weeks, but there would be potential trade-offs of that and what that might mean in terms of where else this program would focus its attention.
I know, down, boy, down. I'm backing off. I'll let you do your thing.
No, I appreciate the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Evans. Councilor Ye?
Thank you. Most of my questions have been answered, but I just had one left. I noticed in the packet, I found the date of when Portland started doing this, but I'm wondering how long I may have missed it. How long has this been going on in other Oregon cities? Approximately. Doesn't have
That's
the
a good
exact
question.
date.
Off the top of my head, I
Okay.
don't know. I know Portland was the first.
Okay. Oh, that helps. Okay, so because I know that date. Yeah.
Yeah. Bend was more recently.
Yeah, so Councilor, approximately. Portland's been around for about 10 years. I think Hillsborough was second. They've been around for 7 or 8 years. Milwaukee's about 6 or 7, and Bend is the most recent. And they were established about 3 years ago.
Okay, great. That's helpful. I was just curious. Yeah, so I don't think I have any other questions. I really appreciate how much research you guys were able to find and to share with us. It's super helpful. I mean, we try very hard to be data-driven, and sometimes it's difficult to find the data we're looking for. So I really appreciate the effort you guys have gone to. The list of citations was very long, so that's very nice. I know in my early young family life, I purchased a home. It was actually very new, but the way it was designed and the way it was heated, it was extremely inefficient and expensive. And while I probably would have still purchased it had I known, it would have been nice walking in to know, as a young person who maybe should have been known better, what I was walking into, right? And having as much data. This is often like the biggest investment you're ever gonna make, right, in your life. And for me at that time, it was like a huge, like all of your savings, and you want to feel confident that you have as much information as is humanly possible in that moment, so that when you're making that huge decision, you're doing it with your eyes wide open. And I've been asking folks, I haven't had anyone say they would not be interested in this information if they were buying a home, that it's like, yeah, it'd be one of the things that I would just want to know, walking into this huge financial decision. So I really appreciate you guys. I'm really looking forward to the next work session. I will hold off all of those questions, even though it's so tempting. But thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Ye. I want to say thank you for this presentation. I always think more information is better. I have been able to purchase homes, and I find myself to be a pretty high information person and still find myself to be a low information person in this respect. Even though across my home purchases, I've had a variety of different fuel types. Councilor Groves, I thank you for saying like you can look up the energy cost, but most people are not doing that, and that's part of what we learned in this process. And they're not doing that. And like my first home, it was a fully wood-burning stove heated home. There was no other heat source. So that would not have been reflected in just a cost, analysis, but would be reflected in this score. And there would be a lot of more information about what are the implications of that. And, it was difficult to heat the rest of my home outside of that one room, right? I would have liked to have a little bit more information there. Similarly, I had a floor baseboard heating that was all electric, but it was really old, but there was a solar panel, right? So there was these balances, but there's some danger there in terms of what happens when that system fails. So I think that having that information is just such a good tool for people who are making this huge investment. It could mean, yes, it might be a $200 cost. A lot of times that gets wrapped up into the mortgage itself. The small initial cost for a potential of huge savings down the line, and access to even more information in terms of how do you improve that infrastructure that you just purchased. I wouldn't have probably made any different decisions in my purchases, but having that knowledge is really good. And it can be a negotiating tool. I think, we look at people who are first-time home buyers or not, have done this multiple times, and it's always nice to have another set of tools in your pocket. So I appreciate this work. I look forward to the next session, and I will turn it now to second round for Councilor Keating, so sorry. First round for Councilor Keating, and then we will do second round quickly with Councilor Clark. Councilor Keating, are you there? I will move to Councilor Clark for a second round, and if Councilor Keating comes back, we will let him jump in the queue.
I'd be happy to yield for Matt if he's there. Thank you, Council President. There? No? All right. Interestingly, I have the privilege to work with realtors every day. I talked to 4 of them today. Asked a lot of folks about this, as well as a home inspector who does home inspections today, just knowing that this issue was coming up. As well as the Eugene Association of Realtors and their folks who communicated with me earlier today. It was suggested to me anecdotally, although I don't have any actual data personally, but it was suggested to me anecdotally that in Bend, a lot of folks just ignore this. I don't know the truth of that, not living there. Maybe that's something you could get better information on what the compliance level is. And secondarily, did I hear you mention just a little while ago that compliance would live in the Sustainability Commission?
The sustainability program, not the
Excuse me,
commission.
the sustainability program.
It would lie with staff.
So you would issue fines for people that don't comply?
We would probably be working with, other parts of the city on that. But I think that's something that we were continuing to think through what the implementation would look like and what the full program design would look like as if this was something that was going to be pursued.
Okay. I just want to ask my colleagues to think about the perspective for just a little moment. $200 may be nothing as a comparison to all the things one spends when buying a house, but this is the same council who said that $50 in application fees for an apartment is way too much and forced people to change what they charge for it because we knew best that it was too expensive, but $200 isn't for essentially a bit of information. I find that interesting. You mentioned that experience in your research showed that it didn't affect the market. Were you talking, and you were talking about other places. Did you, in fact, and I believe this is true based on what communications I've had, but our local association of realtors and the engagement that they did with you, they gave you a different bit of engagement. Am I correct?
We engaged with the Eugene Realtors Association. We held a focus group at the MLS office
Yeah.
on Coburg.
Were they in favor? Did they say it would affect the pricing in the market?
There were concerns that they had concerns that this would impact the market.
Because it's a challenging market that we're in. And one of my concerns is that those are the experts who deal with buying and selling houses in our market. And I want to trust them just like I would when I'd hire one to help me buy a house. They're the experts. And I would suggest that in a normal market, it may, getting additional information may have a benign effect when you have the ability to make a decision or not on one place versus another. Or, you know, say this house as opposed to that one. We don't have that luxury in Eugene. People, when they're qualifying to buy a house,
Counselor?
often will
Your time is
qualify for
concluded. Thank
one.
you.
Sorry, I ran out of time.
Counselor Keating, are you?
Can you hear me now, Council President?
You may have your first round. Thank you.
Can you hear me now, Council President? Okay, perfect. Thank you. As the only renter on council, we got two things that are only current renter to be clear. To Councilor Clark's comments, that's a bit of a disconnect in that it assumes that I and others were just looking at a $50 price tag for application fees. We're looking at, I at least was looking at, through experience, multiple endless application and screening fees that were far north of $200. So it's an oversimplification just to, it's not even apples and oranges, and totally different ballpark entirely. As a renter, I'm keenly interested in the next steps for both incentives and protections. My question revolves around outdated data or the potential for outdated data. 20, 25 years ago, folks were jumping on the natural gas bandwagon as if it was the clean energy solution of the future, and may have got a great home energy score in 2005, 2000 or so. But in 2026, that home energy score might be a little different. When we craft this policy, should council move in this direction, which I suspect and hope we will, when we craft this policy, what best practices can we learn from other communities in regards to timelines that an energy score in 2035 or 2045 might be a little different than an energy score done today?
Good question. I'm not sure if I can fully answer it to the extent that might be satisfactory, but what I can say is this is a standardized tool developed by the U.S. Department of Energy. It is normalized for climate across the whole country. I anticipate, in 10, 15 years, things will change. And given that it's a tool that has been broadly used in public policy spaces, it can catch up. Also, the score, when you get a score, it's good for 7 years. So, if you resell that home within under 7 years, you wouldn't have to get a new score. But if you were outside of that window, you would. And so if there are changes to the tool, over time, homes will have to get rescored.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Council President. I'll see you in person in about a half hour.
Thank you, Counselor Keating. I'm going to give Counselor Kaczynski a second round very quickly, and then we will wrap up.
Thank you. This is going to be a very quick question. as sort of seen in these other cities and like kind of what the staff are thinking of, would the person who would actually write the check for $150 be the home buyer or the home seller?
The seller.
Okay. And just as, and I don't need an answer to this today, but like it'd be good to see, like I know a lot of, like what percentage of the cost in selling and buying a home ends up on the seller versus what ends up on the buyer from sort of a more mandated perspective as opposed to the buyer may choose to make, or the seller may choose to make some voluntary upgrades.
I think, I mean, in a lot of the conversations we had with realtors, they kind of anticipated it as some of them, this would be a cost they might absorb. So it would be something the realtor would pay for as part of their offering. There was one other point I wanted to respond to with Councilor Clark, that we actually do have data on enforcement and compliance rates in Bend. They actually have one of the highest compliance rates in the state, and it's 83%, and there's more information in the policy memo with Earth Advantage.
Thank you. Counselor Zelenka, I'm going to give you 1 minute.
Yeah. To me, an expert is someone who relies on data and not opinion, so on facts. And so while someone might be working in that field, doesn't make them an expert. How did you guys come by the conclusion or key takeaway number 3 that it would be minimal impact? Is that based on data?
Is that the home sale prices?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was based on a lot of the data that's in the policy memo on page, starting on page 14, where there's a number of research efforts that were undertaken to understand across the whole country what has been the impact on home sale prices of disclosure policies. And in some cases, those are really large data sets as well. So that's where that conclusion came from.
That makes you an expert because you're relying on facts as opposed to opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our agenda. Thank you so much for this presentation. We look forward to the next one. I close the February 23rd, 2026 City Council work session. We are adjourned.